Hello and welcome to the Story Engine podcast. My name is Kyle Gray, and today we are changing things up. I have switched over from Zoom recordings to Riverside recordings, so this should make for a better experience whether you're hearing this on audio or now checking us out on YouTube. I'm going to start to host these episodes on YouTube as well, and putting up small clips of them as well. So go check those out and let me know if you notice a difference in the quality that you're experiencing either on sound or visually, which is kind of a new thing. Today on the show, we have Zeahlot Lopez. She is a former therapist, gone business coach, and brings an incredible blend of tactical, practical knowledge on building high six-figure and seven-figure and beyond businesses with a deep knowledge of psychology, which she expresses and embodies really, really well. And finally, she has this sense of spirituality and purpose that I think a lot of people could use a good dose of and are looking for, especially at the cutting edge of leadership. She primarily works with women business leaders and gets incredible results for them. And today we are going to craft a story with her. So without any further ado, let's hand it over to Zeahlot Lopez. Zeahlot Lopez, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
Hi, Kyle.
I am really excited to connect with you today. You are an example to me of the magic of the algorithm. I think we found each other through Instagram and through a couple of different conversations has led to now creating content together. It's been fun to check out your community as well. And I just think that that's the very best thing in the world of social media, where a lot of people talk about all of the distractions and things. And there's people out there doing good things, making good content. And so I'm grateful to be sharing your story with you here today.
Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate you having me.
To start us off, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're making an impact in the world today?
Yeah, who I am. I think the most important part about it is my name, because most people are like, what? Like, what's your name? They're like, oh, I've never heard that before. And I'm like, yeah, like so far, I'm the only one with my name. And I think I'm very true to it. So my name means always faithful to God. And I didn't really grow up religious in any way or going to church. And I live up to my name, always faithful to the belief that there's a higher source, a higher power than ourselves. And my impact really in the world is to help humans alleviate their suffering in whatever capacity that might be. And so I guess I signed up, right? And I raised my hand and I said, hey, I'll help humans alleviate their suffering by understanding themselves emotionally and through a spiritual lens.
I think that's really beautiful. And I've found myself on a really spiritual journey as well. In my younger years, I identified as Christian, and through a lot of my 20s, decided it wasn't for me. And now that I've entered my 30s, after lots of adventures through life, both delightful and painful, found myself wanting to connect with God again, and not necessarily in a Christian way, but in understanding that I'm part of something bigger and serving a deeper purpose than just trying to achieve more and win more and grow more. And I'm curious what your spiritual practices look like right now. How do you connect and convene with your purpose, the universe, and God?
Yeah, such a great question. I'll start by saying that God is my favorite comedian, right? Like we plan and God
Oh
laughs.
yeah.
And so on a daily basis, I start my day with meditation. And so for the past 12 years, I've actually meditated at least at a minimum for an hour a day. And as I've done that and I've grown my practice, I've gotten the gnarliest downloads, but also I can hear myself so clearly. I was in a very big group of women today. And personally, part of my practice is I don't do caffeine. I don't do alcohol. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't do meat. I don't do a lot of things that clog up our clairs, our ability to go and hear the sixth sense and other stuff that normally we wouldn't be able to sense and feel. And for the longest time now, since I've been doing those practices, it's gotten me a lot of lightness, a lot of clarity, a lot of getting rid of what's not necessary. And I feel that that's my very most important practice, that in my diet. I haven't had meat for the past 12 years, and I have to say that it's helped me understand things at a deeper level. Yeah.
Yeah, I think saying no to certain things, whether they are addictions for some or just distractions or higher level things, it makes more space. And I don't currently, or I currently eat meat, but I've understood this as I have done dieting for my health at many times, eating low carbs and low sugar, or cutting this out and emphasizing that. And there's such a relationship with our food that we have, that and all of the other things that you mentioned, that feel good in the moment, and yeah, can be used as a distraction if misaligned in some ways. Tell me about what this looks like with those that you work with. You mentioned you've gotten rid of food to be clearer, and you're helping other people also establish these lines of clarity with your purpose, or their purpose, and spirituality. What are some of the ways that the best people that you've had to work with, how are they feeling blocked? How are they feeling distracted? What do their lives look like?
Yeah, such a beautiful question. So when I help women in business, because I'm a business mentor, a lot of women will come to me and be like, well, why isn't this happening for me? Why isn't this happening? And I always ask myself, and I say, well, have they asked themselves the most important question out of all of them? And the women literally just perk up and they're like, Z, like, what do you mean? How do I become the woman that makes things happen? And in
Mm,
knowing that, right, it's not so much are we clear on what we want, but are we clear on who we need to become or who we really are to make that thing happen? And I think that's the biggest clarity moment that's really transformed individuals' life, not only as a leader or as a business owner, but as a whole human being and as a soul. It's understanding, right? It's have we gotten to a level where the discipline and the determination and the vision is bigger than anything else? Anything else. And that's the biggest transformation. There's understanding, is my soul louder than my body or my mind? And when it's the body's turn, right? Like, where does it lie? And is the mind taking over the others? It's the three bodies and understanding, right? Like, which one do I allow to lead my life?
mm. So things aren't happening for them, and they're probably putting a great deal of effort into the process, wanting it to happen. Okay.
Mhm.
And then another thing you said, like if what where or what body is typically leading them? Is it the mental body or the physical body, or where do people come to you, and what does that look like?
I think it depends on their development. It's interesting that I have found a correlation between the level of someone experiencing suffering will also tell me the level they understand pain and also the capacity they have to love and to receive certain understandings and embody them. So, in plain terms, it's how much shit have you gone through? Can you understand that you have the ability and capability of turning shit into gold, alchemizing it, and then coming out as a better person and helping others on the other side?
Yeah. And so the higher amount of pain, it
Mhm.
sounds like the greater the possibility for the gift and impact if they can find the meaning within it.
Yeah, yeah.
But before they meet you, they can't seem to grasp the meaning and are just grasping at desires and results.
Yeah. And to be fair, there's some people that do understand and they say, hey, like, I get it. I get it. I just don't want to do the next steps. It will require me to embody that. Releasing, allowing, understanding, being compassionate, providing grace, all those good, yummy things that if we ask for that from source or even our highest being, it requires us to go through very uncomfortable situations.
Isn't that interesting? Being in pain and at the same time feeling that it would be uncomfortable to embrace release or compassion, probably for yourself. I think that in my world as a high achiever. Though I'm not a woman, I'm sure that this is the experience for many of them. Um, Giving myself grace and forgiveness is by far the most difficult. I can be really patient with others. I can put myself in other people's shoes and try and understand their situations. But the moment that I make some kind of mistake, it's immediately cracking the whip. And it's funny that because it's something that I'm used to is easy, where the that seems like a better option than the strange idea of giving myself grace.
Hmm. Hmm. Or even just seeing the mirror, right? Like I crack up sometimes where something will trigger me and I have to remind myself and be like, all right, girlfriend, let's have a board meeting here. So I have a board meeting with myself and I'm like, why did that bother you? And then I'll crack up and be like, oh, she's gifting me compassion. Thank you.
There we go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The humanness, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So we've got this. Why is this happening? They're having a difficulty making a sense or finding a meaning of their pain. Is there another quality that they're experiencing right now that really makes them an awesome person for you to work?
Yeah, I absolutely love levels of awareness, right? Like we all have it, even myself, right? Like every day I'm becoming a better version of myself. I wake up and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like I have a new feature, right? Because we all we all start like at standard and just like a car model, right? Where it's like, well, what model am I? And in this game of life, like that's the thing. We're all playing Clue. Like, are you a puzzle piece? Are they a puzzle piece? And so I had this radical idea that every single time I'm trying to learn something new of how things work in this matrix and this like bubble that we're in, I have this understanding. I don't know, I'm going to apply it here. Every time I'm trying to figure something out, the universe sends me a human that gives me a clue and another one that gives me a lesson. And if I can put it together, I get a new client. And that's what the client is able to facilitate in some capacity or another. I just have to have the wisdom to hold it. And when I work with that client, they're a mirror for me and I'm a mirror for them. We're aligned and we're a great match if we can be each other's puzzle piece. And then we do this. Yeah.
Mm. And what I like about that is there's a sense of curiosity and openness, and looking a little bit deeper than the first glance of the situation. And I think that that kind of thinking is what can open up some of the biggest opportunities when we've been kind of going in one direction, trying one thing for so long and so hard. And maybe it's not necessarily a step forward, but a pause and a step sideways or a slight turn in another direction. When we get a message like that, that can really get us to where we're going.
Yes, yes, Kyle. And I think the other understanding that's so important is I've known this since day one in all my practices. When I practice as a psychotherapist, when I practice as a coach, and now as I practice as a mentor, is I am never there to fix or to solve a problem one of my clients has. I'm there to do it with them and to witness. And my whole entire being is for them to no longer need me. They are the main source of their answers. And I see there's a lot of people out there leading others by being like, I am the way, I am the source, I am the answer. And I'm like, no, I'm just doing this thing called life with you. And I happen to have been down that road, right? Down that path, Wayne Dryer, right? I go down a road and I've fallen the hole so many times, I could tell you what road has a hole. That's it. That's the only difference. We all put on our pants the same way. That's what I've discovered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'd love to hear. I imagine, as far as like falling into certain holes in the road, metaphorically, you've seen a lot in transitioning from a clinical psychotherapist to a coach, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious. What are some of the strengths that that background has brought that has been really helpful, and what are some of the things that you really had to change in transitioning out of these roles, and what's that experience been like for you?
Man, I love this question because I feel that if more people in the industry, clinically, medically, would ask themselves this question, there'd be a game changer. There'd be like mass exodus. I think the number one thing that is really understood is a baseline of what the brain is doing and as far as we can understand it so far, like the basics of psychology, basic foundational. And it's so funny that it's you literally have to learn all of that in order to practice. And then the kicker, the most ironic, funniest part of my entire journey is the moment I moved from therapist to coach to mentor to just seeing things like as they are in a spiritual lens, is I had to unlearn everything. And a lot of people would say, like, well, why in the heck would you still go through that? It's the journey, baby. It's the journey for me to literally become the woman I am with the eyes I have and my abilities. Because with my clairvoyance or my clairs open, people in psychology would be like, oh, well, she's crazy. Oh, well, she's paranoid. Oh, well, she's schizophrenic. But that's not the case. I'm just using different abilities. So I feel like there's an overlap, but there's no welcoming and there's no bridge between them currently, I feel, where both can have space for both to coexist and understand one another. And I feel like I'm that bridge. I hear somebody say their challenges about business, and then I go do 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 do, and then I input it into my being, and then the output is, oh, this is what it might mean for you in spiritual terms.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
You've used the word clairs at least
Mm-hmm.
twice in this episode, and it's something I haven't heard very much of, and I would love for you to define that. And then, since we just had a chance to talk about the your clinical background a bit, tell me about this intuitive background that you are now bringing in, and what are the advantage of that? Where do you need to hold your boundaries differently? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I love the question. So the best way I could explain it is like my spidey senses. So I come from the belief that all humans have this amazing superpowers. We all do. Then this thing called domestication happens. We're not good enough. We're told, don't eat that, don't sit there, don't say that, just turn this off. And then we're brainwashed by different things in life, school, systems, politics, governments. Choose your poison. And then when that happens, we use other parts of our human being that get stronger, like the mind, like the body. The sixth sense holds all the clairs, clairvoyance, clairaudience, so people that are able to see things when they're not yet in this timeline in this moment, like ahead of time or way back in the past. There's people that are able to feel things in their body and be like, whoa, what was that? And they feel something in the body that another person might be experiencing. Some people might call it like telepathy or twins, right? Like one twin's there and the other one's like, wow, like they just got hurt. I've heard of all these things my entire life, and I've always had these gifts. And mine specifically is me seeing, it's clairvoyance for me to see. And in my body, my level of empathy, I'd say it's like pretty high. And when I have an individual that's in front of me where they are allowing me, I can feel into their body and their pain. It got interesting because when I was a psychotherapist and practicing clinically, it happened to me once, but I didn't understand it. Lady walks into a room, she's my client, and for the life of me, I couldn't understand why my entire womb was like felt like there was a hand, it was just ripping it from the inside. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? Checked in with myself, it wasn't me. Went to the bathroom, came back, wasn't me. And I was like, is anything going on? Like, is it that time of the month? And I was like, no. So I just asked her and I was like, hey, can I ask you something? And she's like, yeah. I go, do you feel like this inside your womb or your uterus? And then she just broke down and she's like, I just lost my child last week. I had a miscarriage. And I couldn't understand what that was at the time, but what it was is before she told me with words, with vibrational frequency, sound coming out of her mouth, I had felt her pain through the body.
That's really powerful, and I can imagine really difficult to navigate when you don't know how to use it. And I'm curious because I feel like it could be a two-edged sword. And you mentioned earlier on you don't want to fix your clients, but you want to help them see into themselves. And I could imagine seeing you as a clairvoyant person and being like, oh, well, they can have the answers for me. They'll be able to figure things out and get past my own brain and tell me what really to do, when that's not really the purpose of it. How do you guide them with these gifts so that it's not just seeing in and giving them the answers, but actually helping them cultivate their own clairs, so to speak.
I have them just share, and then I ask them, I'm like, okay, well, did you hear that gut feeling inside you tell you no? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, do you want to continue with that? Do you want to listen to that? No? Okay, well, seems we're not aligned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Seems we're not, oh, okay, you do want to listen to that? Oh, okay, you did know that your whole body said no to that and you want to do different? Okay, cool. Tell me more. And that's it. I feel like I'm the echo or the it's okay to choose you, it's okay to follow that kind of a thing on the side. And from there they can move forward. I have found that clients that are already empowered and already aware do much better when it comes to that level of moving with the full embodied yes to something rather than no.
I can see that. And that would go back to the perhaps the levels of awareness that you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, so we've gotten a few hints at how you do your work differently, or what makes you unique as a coach, and how you uniquely serve women leaders, women entrepreneurs. What else is there, or what do you think are the main things about what you do that makes you particularly different and unique, and gets the results that you promise better, or easier or faster than somebody else could?
Yeah, I think it's what I said earlier that I'm a bridge. I can speak business and I can speak spiritual. And if something's going on emotionally, I can speak clinical. So I could see it from a lot of different lenses. And here's the most important part, I'm not for everybody. And that took me a really long time to understand, Kyle, but now I really own it. And I'm like, hey, I have three principles. Let's see if we jive. Let's see if we align. My first principle is building a business is spiritual. Do we agree? Cool. Okay, let's move forward. Number two, that I 100% go with is we don't have business problems. We have unprocessed mommy and daddy issues and wounds that we still need to creep through and see what's still living inside us that hasn't been processed, that hasn't been addressed, that hasn't been healed. And
Mm-hmm.
the third one is you are always the answer, no one else. You are always the answer. And if we align on those three, then we're going to have a much better opportunity to do the work. And from there, whenever it is that they just share very openly, I'm like, all right, let's take these next 2 hours and I'm just going to listen. You tell me what you think is going on. Then what happens inside me is I receive the information, right? It's an input, it comes into me. And there's three things that happen inside me. There's a bucket where I'm like, okay, got it. It's operations. Oh, no, okay, wait, that's sales. She needs a sales pipeline. Then she needs a nurturing sequence. And it goes all the way down through the line where it's literally biz language, bro language, whatever you want to call it. I can go that route because of my experience. Then the second bucket is the spiritual lens where I'm like, okay, I see where they're in their ascension level. I get it. Then the third bucket is my clinical hat where I'm like, okay, this is unprocessed grief. That makes sense why it's coming up in this department of the business and why this is coming up. And then in my brain, I put it all together, I mix it in a pot, and then I give it to them in a language that they'll understand. My favorite is when they can understand all three, but it's very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Most people that I work with understand two. Yeah.
I like that. That's a good, really interesting milestone to be able to tell where somebody is, or if somebody's for you or not. Because, yeah, I can imagine people who are like, I just want the business tips. They're not going to get very far unless they can start to examine the spiritual and the clinical elements of this.
That's right. You know, Kyle, I want to give you some really great feedback, and I think you're amazing because you understand one really important principle as to why I think you and I really mesh well together.
Yeah.
You and I both understand that communication is the pretend understanding that you and I both understood what was shared or said. That's not
Mm.
true. Like, that's not necessarily true. So many people make the erroneous mistake that it's like, well, I said that. Didn't you understand it? And it's like, no. Just because somebody says something doesn't mean the other one understood it, took it, and was like, oh, okay, got it. And you mentioned that not only in your work, but you've mentioned that when I've heard you speak, where you're like, it's an erroneous idea that communication is actually happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is
Mm-hmm.
something I really appreciate that insight and that feedback. And I'm deeply honored because this is one of the areas that I think about the most is
Uh-huh.
when people are communicating. And a lot of the times, especially in what I've been writing recently, especially as experts like ourselves who've spent decades honing our craft and honing our skills and usually hanging out with other smart people and high-fiving each other on podcasts like this, we our locus of like what is known or what is common knowledge gets a little shifted. And a lot of the times when we want to speak to our audience or speak to others, we still think that we're surrounded by other peers when people don't understand these concepts quite as well as we do. And a lot of the times I find the biggest problems is that the experts are focused on proving themselves and sharing as much information as possible from the vantage point that they have when they try to communicate, and instead of doing the extra work, which is hard work and it is counterintuitive, to truly meet the listener where they are and to understand what their perspective is and what their life is, and speak to them in a way that meets them instead of somewhat like a parent child relationship where we just blast them with a bunch of information and expect them to kind of take it all in.
Yes, inputs and outputs. And the reason I mentioned that, Kyle, that's so important is because I've realized something in doing my work, right? Because you asked of like, well, when people share something, what happens inside here and then the output, right? I've realized that when people speak the same language as me, business, spiritual, clinical, take your pick, Spanish, I speak Spanish or English, I don't have to explain myself. There's already a foundation there where I'm like, awesome, we can just get into the work. That's what I've realized. When you have people that speak the same languages as you, in any type of language, whether it be classic car language, whether it be business, whether it be podcast, whatever it might be, you don't have to do extra work to even just get them there. There's already alignment. Then from there, it's just, hey, do you like this? Does this interest you? Cool, let's do this.
Yeah, I like that. And taking the effort to make sure that everybody is speaking the same language. But it's so much easier when you know your people, you know who you're for, and you understand them and are coming from a place of love.
Mhm.
Speaking of love, what are some of the things that once people are have worked with you for a while, what are the outcomes, the results that they love to experience? What do they come away with? It seems like they become the person that makes things happen, but there's more to it than that.
I find that a lot of people who have had transformations, they go and they share the love with others. They go and they teach, like they have this natural born ability to be like, hey, did you know that we have the ability to choose this and this? It's not an or situation, it's an and.
Mm-hmm.
That's a win because that's how we're going to make global impact. That's the whole point. It's like each one teach one. Consciousness. So if
Mm.
one person knows something, it increases their consciousness. I teach another, they teach someone else, they teach someone else. It's beautiful. That's what's going to wake up the earth, new earth. That's the beauty of it. And then everybody wins.
Yeah. So they're making things happen. And then I imagine, especially working with women and the way that you described things, they're I intuit that they're tapping into their feminine flow and allowing things to come to them instead of trying to operate from a high masculine, do hard, grind hard, do all these things. They're able to go about their business in a way that's authentic to them, and things work better because of it.
Yes, Kyle. And I'd also like to add to that that this is what I feel is interesting when people work with me. I do have women that have a very beautiful mix of features, as we all do, right? Masculine, feminine, whatever it is you want to call it, right? Like doer versus just be. And I do work with a lot of women that are just be. And I'm like, okay, honey, we can't just manifest. We got to take
Mm,
action. That's part of this. That's part of this formula. And they're like, oh, because they're very much in their feminine. They're very beautiful. They're soft. They're elegant. They're feelers. They're being. They're just being. And there comes a time if you want to move in business where I'm like, honey, you got to take some action because that's what it
Mhm.
is. It's the desire and the knowing that's what you want. Well, if that's what you want, who do you need to become to do it? And that's where a lot of people are like, oh, then I have other women, which is interesting. They're very much in their masculine. They're just go, 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 do, do, do. And I'm like, well, there's this thing called just be, and you become the honey pot. You attract. So there's a mix. And I don't ever want to say that there's a good balance. There's a good balance for them. That's what I've learned. Like, what feels good to you to get what you want and get where you want.
Which I think brings it back to what makes you unique is that you deep dive and you're looking at people through these many different lenses and seeing what they need. It's not a single one size fits all formula for everybody. There are everybody has their own journey. And I think through your perception of understanding and reflecting them, their journey unfolds.
Yes. And a lot of people will ask, like, well, Z, if it's so prescription and if it's so unique, how do you have groups? The answer I always give is there's patterns. There's patterns that certain people have, certain women, where it's like, I'm divorced and I'm divorced because my partner couldn't lead. My partner couldn't lead because I wouldn't let him because I didn't feel protected and provided for. There's patterns. And I'm like, no wonder she's a doer. And then I have,
Mm.
the woman that is very in her feminine. And I'm like, okay, so I understand that we still need to grow your advocacy. We still need to grow your action orientated so you can trust yourself. And those have patterns too. So it's my ability to see it over and over and over, experience, getting down the road, seeing the hole over and over, and having a good amount of reps in there for me to say, okay, I've seen this before. I can't assume, but I can ask really great creative questions to see if that makes sense.
That sounds great to me. Z, I would love to take a moment to dive into your experience. I'd like to read back to some of the notes I've taken based on this, and with your intuitive, brilliant mind, I would love for you to search your body and your mind and your experience for moments in your life that reflect this for you. When did you feel most like this? Wondering, why isn't this happening? And feeling a great deal of pain, but at the same time being unwilling to embrace the uncomfortable things like compassion. These different stories in your own mind, different expectations competing against each other and leaving you confused and probably trying a bunch of shiny object things. When was this most present and typical in your own life?
Thank you, Kyle, for the question. It's at my peak of suffering, of the experience of suffering. My dad had just died, and my mom didn't have a funeral or a wake or a viewing or any of the traditional any goodbyes in any way. And I literally was inside her house and I was like, wait, what? Like, what do you mean we're not going to have this? And my mom said, yeah, this is what it is. And I couldn't capture it. I couldn't understand why I couldn't dig deep into my compassion. It was as if the well had dried up. Everything inside me was just not there anymore. My resources that I once had a treasure and full of, my treasure chest wasn't full at the moment. I was at capacity for grief and loss and all the humanness, all the human stuff. And now when I look back at it, all I can tell myself is, you did the best you could, kid. You did the best. Like, you left it all on the field. Now I
Mm-hmm.
look back 2.5 years later and I'm like, wow, this was happening for me, not to me. This was
Yeah.
happening to me. So I could learn to be compassion. So I could learn to be love and not yearn for love. So I could be closure and not have to go look for it.
Yeah. Can you tell me about the room that this conversation occurred in? What did it look like? What was the furniture like? What did it smell like in there? What was this place that this conversation
Mm,
happened like?
my parents' house. My mom has always been a hoarder, even before I was born. It's very cluttered. It doesn't really smell like anything. My mom wasn't really big into cooking, so I didn't smell like food. It didn't feel like home anymore without dad. It felt cold, it felt distant, and it felt as though it didn't fit anymore. It felt like a very uncomfortable sweater when you're 10 years old, but the sweater's from when you were like 5 years old. That's
Hmm.
what it felt like. Hmm. Yeah.
Just taking one last note. I love this. So you set out on a journey to come back into alignment and to understand the levels of pain that you were experiencing and alchemize them into something more beautiful. Now, can you tell me about a moment of the opposite spectrum, of the opposite frequency, the I can't believe this is my life, I've made it, where you make things happen? You aren't just attracting abundance, but you have an overwhelming amount of love and impact to share with the world. And you are balanced in your doing and being energies in just the right way for you.
Oh, this is great because I'm having these moments that are so simple and so basic, as some people would call it, that is just beautiful. Literally, like, no hair done, no makeup, just woke up. I'm in my sweats. I'm in this blanket that I've loved for years. And then I'm just holding the dog. My partner's next to me. And I'm like, damn, this is fucking great. This is
Mm-hmm.
fucking great. Like, that's it. Just this moment right here. It's true presence. And I don't have as many as I would like, as I will have in the future. And I've been having more of them. They're just so plain and basic, or I'm just on the grass and I'm literally like just laid out. I'm laid out and I'm like, wow, how did I get so lucky to keep my limbs that feel everything? How did
Mm-hmm.
I get so lucky to be able to experience being a human this time around and feel all the humanness and have all these joke and funny moments happen? How did I get so lucky to have this vessel this time around to be a woman? That's really cool. Yeah, that's what those feel like.
And at the same time, if you're able to experience this spaciousness, then we can imply that things with your work are good enough that you're not constantly stressing or trying to think about how to fix things, that you can actually be present in these moments. And so things are working for you on many levels to support this tiny little bubble of spaciousness we're seeing here.
I love the question, and I do want to be honest in case there's anybody that hears this, because a lot of times I hear a lot of bullshit answers where, and I say bullshit answers because the truth of the matter is there's always going to be stressful moments. The truth of the matter is you're always going to have amazing moments where you're like, wow, I can't believe I actually got to do that. And we call this my work, right? I'm able to stay present in that moment with my client. And if I'm deeply honest, I know that the moment I walk out of there, I am a leader. I have a team. I also cut checks for other people. And so it would be irresponsible of me if I don't take a look at those. And there will be a level of stress associated with those in my leadership, in my direction as an operational CEO of my company and anything else I'm running, like a household. The key I have found is how much of that is there in balance with gratitude for me being able to show up in the moment with my clients.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an excellent distinction. And yeah, too often, especially on podcasts or on social media, everybody wants to paint a rosy picture. And I think what you've illustrated shows even more of the fortitude that's possible when we can hold this great deal of responsibility and know that it's taken well enough care of to give us the freedom to have those slow moments.
And there's
Okay.
seasons too, Kyle. Like there's other people, maybe you add a stressor into the mix that is just part of like life evolution. You have a child, you get a dog, you have a sick parent, you have a neighbor that you might extend yourself to and say, hey, if you need me, let me know. Those are added stressors, but they're welcomed and they're lovely. And there's other life stressors that you never even knew. My dad died in 90 days. From one day, I was a CEO running it and I could work any hour of the time. Then the next Monday, I was in the hospital watching him die, praying to God I had enough Wi Fi signal just to send an email. You never know what life brings. Forrest Gump was right. Life is like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get. That's the thing. I have learned that the most important principle of anything that you will ever do as a human and even as a leader, as a business owner, is just to flow and flex like bamboo. It's the most important lesson.
Wow. Where were you? Were you working as a psychologist or a psychotherapist when you got the news that your dad was dying?
I had a few clients on my caseload. I had 10, but my main full time was coaching other mental health and wellness professionals to grow their business.
Ah,
So I had two businesses at the time. I had my private practice and my coaching business.
where were you when you got this news about your dad the first time that made you go to the hospital the next week?
It was 10 p.m. at night. My mom came home without my dad, and I was like, "Hey, mom, like, where's dad?" I had been living with them for 6 months. I gave up my apartment. I had planned to move to Colombia or maybe even Mexico. And my dad's like, "Hey, just come on, live with us for a few months, figure it out." So I did. My mom comes home that night, May 4th of 2021, and she goes, the doctor said that your dad has leukemia. And I felt as if the earth stopped. And I was like, leukemia, what the heck is that? Took out my phone, looked it up, and I was like, cancer. I was like, Mom, you're wrong. Cancer. Dad doesn't have cancer. He's fine. She's like, no, he has cancer. And that was that. And then he never came back home. He never came back home. I never saw him sick a day in his life. The dad was a Mexican dad till he was in the hospital. Always building something, always working on something, always doing, always doing.
Mm, really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think I'm ready to share your story. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm home waiting for my mother to get home. I've just been moving out of my psychotherapy practice and really expanding my coaching business. And things are firing on all cylinders. I've got new clients coming in, and I'm trying to grow this with big plans to move around the country and around the world. I'm up late writing a few emails, and at 10 p.m., my mom comes in and I ask, "Where's dad? He should be here, shouldn't he?" And she says, "The doctor says your dad has leukemia." And I sit there with a half written email. Part of me is pulling back to getting to work, and part of me is trying to feel this moment that's happening. And I pick up what I'm doing and I go and decide and visit my dad. And I can remember this struggle and this pull between this moment and what was happening inside of me, constantly battling. The next Monday, I was sitting at my father's bedside, wanting to enjoy these moments that I didn't know how long we would have with him, and still occasionally peeking at my phone, seeing if I had enough Wi Fi to send out one more email. There was this constant struggle of being connected with myself, connected with God, connected with the world around me, and at the same time, wanting to make things happen, make the most of this moment, and to move through everything that I was feeling. Even as a therapist for many years, I could see these same limiting patterns and challenges playing out in my life and through the story of my parents unfolding before my eyes. And a few months later, once again at home, I can remember looking around the place, seeing the different boxes of knickknacks and things that my mom would stash and hold on to, wondering if there were some patterns that I was holding on to from this, and talking about dad and him never coming home. And she tells me, we're not going to have a funeral. And all of a sudden, all of this rage, all of this love boils up. What do you mean we're not going to have a funeral? What are we going to do? Why? And it was at this moment that I felt my well that I had been giving to my business, giving to others, giving to everyone, everybody except myself, had finally run dry. And it was in this room with way too many things, this childhood house that felt like an old sweater that was itchy and too tight and didn't fit for me anymore, that I realized that something needed to change. Something needed to bring my life back into alignment so I could feel that I was living with purpose, so that I could build a bridge between these worlds of business, of spiritual, and of the mind, that all of which I were passionate in, but seemed so disconnected. And to process through the issues and the pain that for such a long time had been at the driver's seat of my life, often without me recognizing it. Now, friends, this took many years and a lot of costly and painful mistakes. But over the course of that time, I started to develop a system to listen to my own spirit and my own intuition and to find the right actions based on that. A system to make sense of the love and the pain that I have felt and derive a deeper meaning and purpose from it all. And I began building and expanding and refining my coaching company and finding women that were experiencing these same pains, ripping them in every direction, and started to work with them, not giving them the answers, but helping them find the answers within themselves. And over this time, as my business started to grow within alignment to me, I found myself having more space again. Whether it was going home and sitting on the couch with my partner and just enjoying a moment wrapped up in a blanket, or sitting in the grass with my shoes up and staring up at the sky and realizing that this was the space. These were the little things that I had been looking for all along. But it took a process to get there. And it reminded me that one time, laying in the grass and staring up at the sky and being so grateful that this is my life, that it reminded me this is what I came here for, and this is why I do this. Not just so I can experience these moments, but so women, leaders at the front lines of change in this world who are more needed than ever, can experience both this same sense of purpose, the same sense of authority and agency in their lives, and the peace and space to enjoy a moment in the grass and smile and appreciate the adventure of your life. And over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to teach you just how you can tap into that yourself.
What's the title of the story, Kyle?
Ooh, what a great question.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. I'm thinking of something with boxes for some reason, or just like the boxes. The new home within. Yeah. Have you shared a story quite like that one before, or how do you see any possibilities of sharing something like this in your messaging and your media and reaching more of your clients?
I actually have a story I've shared. We're slicing it up and we put it in our newsletter every week. We share another episode. I'm a very big fan, maybe because I'm Mexican, of novelas. Have you ever watched one?
I have watched a couple.
They're dramatic for a reason, but they keep you coming. And every single week they do like a little like recap, and then they give you like a preview of what's to come, so they like dig you in. And I realized for the longest time that I thought my novela was just a drama and it just brought me all this stuff. But now I realize people watch soap operas. People watch them. And so that's been my main thing with storytelling. How do we share with no BS, but honesty, authenticity, the message to an audience in a narrative with messaging they'll understand? It's been such a beautiful, hectic journey. And so my answer, Kyle, is Yeah, we're sharing the story. And I think that's a piece of the healing. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I think that it's can we enjoy our lives just like a novella and see the ups and downs of it as the twists and turns of an interesting journey along the way? Zeahlot, this has been an amazing exploration of the mind, the body, the spirit, the soul, and of your story. Thank you so much for playing full out and creating with us today on the podcast. Where can we go to learn more about you? And do you have any closing thoughts for us today?
Closing thoughts. Yeah. A question I always like to ask myself at the end of the day is, did I improve someone's life? Did I make an impact? Did I change something for the better? Did it go up? And it's the littlest thing, right? People can connect with me and they can find me online through any single channel, you name it: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, across the board with my name. And I'm so thankful that my mom gave me my name because it's the same thing everywhere across the board. I got so lucky with branding, right? It's like Oprah, but Zeahlot. So it's Zeahlot. That's it across the board. You'll find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Zeahlot, for joining us today on the Story Engine podcast.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it.